The girl in the yellow dress stood so still that even the wind seemed afraid to move around her. The sunlight hit the dust at her feet, turning the air gold as she stared at the man tied to the tree. His arms were bound tight behind the rough bark, ropes digging into his skin, tattoos stretching across muscles that were tense but controlled, like a predator choosing not to fight. He wasn't supposed to wake up yet. He wasn't supposed to open his eyes and look at her like that. Like he recognized something in her. Something she didn't want anyone to see. But he did. And the moment their eyes met, the story stopped being simple. The girl didn't blink. She didn't step back. She didn't cry. She just said the words that would change everything. "You shouldn't have come here." The man tried to speak, but his throat was dry, his voice sandpapered. He swallowed, leaning his head back against the tree as he took her in. The yellow dress, the bare feet powdered with dust, the way her small hands curled into fists even when she tried to hide it. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes lifted toward the warehouse behind him. Huge, gray, empty-looking, but something inside it kept her watching, listening. Her shoulders tightened whenever the shadows shifted, as though someone might step out at any moment. The man followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "You with them?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, and then she surprised him. "You're hurt," she said softly. He exhaled, a long, bitter sound. "Yeah, I noticed." For a moment, he tried to move his hands, but the rope cut deeper. He winced, and the girl stepped forward before she could stop herself. Small, cautious steps, like approaching a wounded animal that might either collapse or bite. She studied the knots with a seriousness far too old for her age. "You didn't tie me up, did you?" he murmured. She didn't look at him. "No." "Then who did?" The girl's lips pressed together, sealed tight. The kind of silence that wasn't fear. It was survival. He understood that silence. He had lived in it most of his life. Hit the subscribe button and comment below the time you are watching this video. Support like this helps us to bring to you more thrilling stories every day. The breeze shifted, carrying faint voices from inside the warehouse. Muffled, sharp, angry. The girl's breath hitched. She stepped back and stayed behind him, using the tree as a shield. The man heard it too. His eyes sharpened. The tension in the air thickened. "They're still here," he said under his breath. The girl whispered, "They're looking for me." His blood went cold. He turned his head as much as the ropes allowed. "Why?" She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced at the ropes again, hesitating, thinking, judging him. The man watched her, trying to figure out the kind of child who could stand this close to danger and not run. "You shouldn't help me," he said. "If they see." "They won't," she cut in. Her voice was quiet, but it was steady, too steady. The man narrowed his eyes. "You know them." She nodded. "You saw what they did to me." Another nod. "And you're not afraid?" The girl finally looked at him. Really looked. "I'm more afraid of what they'll do to my mom." Something cracked open in the man's expression. Something small, something human. He leaned forward even though the rope burned into his wrists. "What happened to your mom?" The girl swallowed hard. "They took her. Last night." The wind carried another echo of arguing from the warehouse. She flinched. The man clenched his jaw. "What's your name?" he asked again. This time, she answered. "Laya." He nodded once, slow. "Laya, if you help me, I swear I'll help you get her back." She studied him again, the way only a child could. Simple, honest, without mercy. She stepped closer, lifted her small hands, and touched the knot. Her fingers trembled, but she kept going, loosening one loop, then another. The man swallowed. "Why help me?" She didn't look at him when she whispered it. "Because you're the only one they didn't kill." And with that, the rope loosened just enough for him to breathe. Debbie's fingers were still curled around the knot she had loosened when the memory struck her, the one she had tried to bury under silence and dust. For a moment, the warehouse in front of her blurred, and the world pulled her backward into the morning's shadows. The same warehouse, the same cracked windows and dead air. But everything had sounded different then, alive with footsteps, doors slamming, voices rising. It had started with her mother. "Stay here, Debbie. Don't follow me. Promise." Her mother rarely spoke in that tone. Sharp, urgent, scared. Debbie had nodded, but the moment the wooden door closed, she stepped outside and began trailing her mother from a distance. She wasn't supposed to follow, but she knew her mother. Whenever she got that look in her eyes, the one like she was thinking through pain, Debbie knew something was wrong. So she followed. Her mother walked fast, almost running, holding something tight inside her apron pocket. A folded piece of paper peeked out. Debbie tried to get close enough to read it, but her mother disappeared around the corner of the warehouse. Debbie slowed her steps, creeping around the rusted gutter so quietly even the gravel didn't crunch. Then she saw her mother meet a man by a side door. Not the tattooed man tied to the tree. This one was tall, wearing black, his voice low but sharp like broken glass. Debbie trusted him. Or she used to. He was one of the people her mother worked for, carrying laundry, food, notes. Everyone in the neighborhood called him Uncle Ray, even though nobody smiled around him. Her mother always said, "Respect him. He pays us." But that morning, he wasn't paying anyone. He was angry. His voice bounced off the warehouse walls. Debbie pressed her back against the cement and listened. "You said you had the message," he snapped. "I did," her mother whispered. "I gave it to Gary." Gary. That was the tattooed man's name. Debbie didn't know that then. She just felt her stomach twist. Uncle Ray stepped closer to her mother, crowding her against the wall. And he didn't do what he was told. "Do you know what that means?" Debbie saw her mother's hands shake. "Please. I only delivered it. That's all." "Not anymore," Ray said. "Now you're part of the problem." Debbie's breath caught in her chest. She wanted to run to her mother, to pull her away, but her feet were glued to the dirt. Ray grabbed her mother's arm and jerked her inside the warehouse. Debbie stared at the closing door, her heart pounding like it wanted to escape. She knew she should run home. Knew she should find help. But she didn't. She followed again. Inside the warehouse gloom, she found a crack between two broken wall panels and pressed her eye to it. Her mother was pushed into a corner. 3 other men were inside. Rough, impatient, all wearing anger like a uniform. "Where is he now?" one of them demanded. Ray answered, "He's coming. We told him we have her." Her mother shook her head, terrified. "You said if I stayed quiet." "That was before he crossed us," Ray muttered. "Now he needs to learn what happens to people who pretend loyalty." Debbie had no idea who they meant. Not until heavy footsteps shook dust from the rafters. He walked in like he owned the ground, head shaved, arms covered in dark tattoos, a chain around his neck. The man she would later find tied to the tree. Gary Graham. Even then, he didn't look scared. He looked angry, like a storm waiting to break. "What did you do?" Gary snapped. Ray smirked. "We asked politely. She didn't cooperate." Gary stepped forward, and instantly 3 guns were drawn. Debbie almost screamed. Ray shook his head. "Don't try it. You're outnumbered." Her mother whispered, "Don't help me, please." But Gary ignored her. "You hurt her, you deal with me," he growled. Ray laughed. "That's the plan." Everything happened too fast after that. A punch. A gunshot into the ceiling. A shout. A struggle. Debbie saw Ray grab a pipe from the floor and swing it hard into Gary's ribs. Saw Gary drop to his knees. Saw 2 men grab his arms while Ray tied his hands behind him with vicious force. Her mother tried to reach him. "Stop. He had nothing to do with this." Another blow silenced her. Debbie's nails dug into the wooden crate she hid behind. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let a sound escape her lips. Ray leaned close to Gary. "You should have done what the message told you. Now you'll be an example." "Leave her out of it," Gary rasped. Ray looked at Debbie's mother. "Oh, she's already in." He motioned to the others. "Take him to the tree. Make it slow." Debbie watched helplessly as they dragged Gary across the dirt, out the warehouse doors. His legs scraped the ground. The sun was brighter outside, so bright she had to shield her eyes. Through slats in the plywood, she watched them tie him to the tree. Watched Ray spit at his boots. Watched the men walk back inside to discuss what to do next. She crouched behind a stack of broken crates, the warehouse swallowing her in shadows and dust. Her stomach churned. Her hands shook. She couldn't see her mother anymore. She didn't know if she was alive, or somewhere deeper in the building. She stayed hidden until the voices inside turned into arguing again. Louder, angrier. Something about finishing the job and finding the girl. She didn't realize she had moved until she felt sunlight hit her face again. She had walked outside. Walked straight toward the man tied to the tree. He looked unconscious. His head slumped to the side. A bruise purpled along his jaw. His shirt was torn where Ray had struck him. Debbie stood in front of him and waited. Waited for him to wake up. Waited for him to open his eyes. Waited for anything that would tell her whether she was making the biggest mistake of her life. When he finally stirred, groaning softly, her breath caught. He looked at her like he had been expecting her. Like he knew exactly why she'd come. Like he recognized her fear even before she said a word. Standing there, staring at him, Debbie realized something she didn't want to believe. This man was dangerous. But not to her. Not the way the others were. And if she didn't help him, her mother would never come back. That was what she had seen. That was why she stepped forward. That was why her small hands reached for the knot holding him captive. Because Gary Graham was the last person she should trust, but the only person she could. Gary watched the little girl's hands fall away from the rope, her breath shaky, her eyes flicking back toward the dark mouth of the warehouse. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Dust swirled lazily in the sunlight, settling on his boots, his wrists, her yellow dress. Everything felt too quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. He shifted slightly, wincing as the rope dug deeper into his skin. "You didn't tie me up," he said at last. Debbie didn't answer. She just kept staring at the warehouse like it might swallow her whole. "I'm right, aren't I?" Gary pressed gently. Her small chin dipped once. A nod. "Thought so." His voice was rough, but there was a softness underneath. Something tired, something honest. He studied her face, memorizing the fear she tried hard to hide. It wasn't fear of him. Not really. Her eyes kept darting toward the open doors behind them. Someone was still inside. Someone who scared her more than a tattooed stranger tied to a tree. "What's your name?" he asked again, quieter this time. She hesitated. "Debbie." He nodded. "Pretty name." She didn't smile. She didn't move. She just watched him like he might suddenly lunge, even though he couldn't move an inch. "I'm Gary," he said. She blinked. Just Gary. Just Gary. Not Gary Graham. Not the name whispered like a warning in back alleys. Not the name men feared and respected in the same breath. Just Gary. For her. Her eyes narrowed the tiniest bit, suspicious but curious. "Why did they tie you here?" He let out a humorless breath. "Long story. Short version? Some people don't like me very much." She stared at him. "Did you do something bad?" Kids didn't dance around questions. She hit straight to the bone. Gary looked down at the dirt, then at the rope, then back at her. "Depends who you ask. Mom said people who get tied up did something wrong." He swallowed the sting that sentence brought. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "people get tied up because they didn't do what the wrong people wanted." Debbie's eyes flicked again toward the warehouse. The fear in her body was so sharp Gary could feel it through the air. "Is your mom in there?" he asked. Her breath hitched. That was answer enough. Gary leaned back against the tree, trying to ignore the throbbing in his ribs. His head was clearing now. His memory, too. Ray's face. The pipe. The message. The betrayal. They wanted leverage. They wanted obedience. They wanted blood. But they didn't kill him. Not yet. They wanted Debbie's mother alive for a reason. That meant there was still time. Gary's voice softened. "Debbie." I'm not the monster those men say I am. She didn't answer. Her fingers picked at the hem of her dress. I'm serious, he said. I'm not here to hurt you. Or your mom. She looked up, and for the first time he saw something other than fear. Doubt, yes, but also hope trying to breathe through the cracks. You were angry, she whispered. I was, he admitted. When they took your mom, when they swung at me. But not at you. You yelled, she insisted. I heard it. Yeah, he said softly. People yell when they're trying to protect someone. The wind blew between them, carrying the sharp metallic smell of the warehouse interior. Rust, oil, something darker. Debbie shivered. You think I'm dangerous, Gary said. She bit her lip. They said you were. And you believe them? Her voice was small. I don't know. He nodded. Fair enough. Debbie stepped closer. Not much, just half a step, but her courage was unmistakable. She looked at the knot again. The rope rubbed red against Gary's skin, cutting deeper each time he breathed. You loosened it already, he said. She froze. Not all the way. I know. He lifted his bound wrists a little. The rope tightened again. If you loosen the rest, I might get free. She swallowed. Would you hurt them? He didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch long enough for truth to settle. If I have to, he said. But I won't hurt you. Debbie's eyes glistened. They'll come back. Yes. His voice was steady, deadly certain. They will. And if they see me helping you, they'll take you too, Gary finished. Her bottom lip trembled, but she clenched her fists to hide it. Debbie, he said softly, you're alone out here. And you shouldn't be. Whoever tied me up, they don't care about you. They don't care about your mom. They'll use anyone they can to get what they want. She stared down at the rope, tears gathering but refusing to fall. I don't know what to do. You don't have to trust me, Gary said. You just have to survive. And right now, survival means making a choice. Debbie closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she reached out her small hand again. But not to free him. She loosened only one knot, just enough to give him movement, but not enough to break the ropes. Then she stepped back. You can move a little now, she whispered. But not too much. Why? Gary asked gently. Because... Her voice cracked. Because if you get loose too fast, they'll hear it. And they're angry today. Really angry. Gary stared at her, this small girl standing between him and an entire warehouse of danger, trembling but still thinking, still planning, still fighting in the only ways she knew how. What about you? He asked. What are you going to do? Debbie wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know. Her voice was barely audible. I'm scared of you, she admitted. But I'm more scared of them. Gary's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight again, testing the loosened knot. It gave slightly, biting less into his wrists. They'll come back, Debbie said. Soon. He looked at her, really looked, at the fear she carried, at the courage under it, at the child forced to grow old too fast. Debbie, he murmured, you're not alone. Not anymore. She blinked, startled. Gary leaned forward as far as the rope allowed. Stay close, he said. And when the time comes, run when I tell you. Not before. Her breath caught. Why? Because, he said, eyes steady on hers. I'm not dying here. The voices reached them before the wind did, sharp, jagged, cutting through the rustle of the savanna grass. The girl froze. The man tied to the tree lifted his head, every muscle in his face tightening as the echoes rolled out of the warehouse like something rotten being stirred. Someone's in there, she whispered. He didn't need to answer. The anger in those voices was enough. Two men. Arguing. Footsteps pacing. And then, the kid. Find her. The girl's breath broke in her chest. They were talking about her. The man's eyes snapped toward her. You hear that? She nodded, throat closing. Inside, metal clanged. Something heavy dropped. A door slammed open, rattling the frame. Their voices grew clearer, closer, thick with fury. You lost her. How hard is it to keep track of a child? She wasn't supposed to be here. None of this was supposed to happen. You think the boss will care? If she saw us dragging him. Shut up. Don't say his name out loud. The girl pressed herself low behind the tall grass, trembling. The man watched her, really watched her, his eyes scraping over every shake in her hands. Those voices, he murmured, and there was something wounded in the way he said it. I know them. Her gaze flicked up, uncertain. He swallowed, jaw ticking. I used to work with them. Work, she whispered. Like what kind of work? He didn't answer right away. He stared at the warehouse as if it was a ghost rising from his past. His breathing grew heavier, slower, like he was fighting memories clawing their way up his throat. They weren't always like this, he muttered. We came up together, trusted each other, ate from the same pot, watched each other's backs. His eyes darkened. But trust doesn't last long in the kind of life we lived. The girl pulled her knees tight to her chest. What kind of life? Finally, he lifted his gaze and met hers. The kind you should run from. Her heartbeat stuttered. He took a breath, voice roughening. They betrayed me, turned on me. I don't know why yet, but I know what they want. He looked down at the ropes biting into his skin. They didn't tie me here just to scare me. They tied me here to finish me. The girl blinked hard. The weight of his words sank slowly, like rain soaking deep into the ground. She dropped her eyes, thinking. If they betrayed him, if they tried to kill him, and if they were looking for her. They saw me, she whispered. They know I saw them. He nodded grimly. That's why they'll come after you. But why? I didn't do anything. In the warehouse, one man shouted again. She's just a kid. Why not let her run? She can't do anything to us. The other snapped back. The boss said no witnesses. The girl flinched as if slapped. The man tied to the tree closed his eyes briefly, as though the words physically hurt him. That's how they work now. No witnesses. No loose ends. It's what they learned from the world we lived in. But her voice cracked. I didn't mean to see anything. I know, he said softly. But they don't care about meaning. Only survival. Her fingers dug into the dirt. The man glanced toward the warehouse again. Listen to me. You're not safe here. You have to go. She shook her head instantly. No. They'll catch me. They know this place better than I do. His jaw tightened. He tugged subtly against the ropes. The fibers burned his skin. He winced but kept pulling, testing the knots she'd loosened earlier. Those voices, he whispered. I used to trust them with my life. And now they want to take yours. He looked at her again. I'm not letting that happen. But you can't do anything, she said. You're tied up. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You loosened one of the knots. It's not enough to get me free yet, but it's enough to give me a chance. She swallowed. Hard. Why should I trust you? She asked, voice trembling but steady in its suspicion. They said you're dangerous. He looked at her with something raw and unguarded, like a wound without a bandage. His voice dropped to a low murmur. I am dangerous. But not to you. She stared. The warehouse door banged open in the distance. Footsteps thudded onto the dirt. Closer. The man leaned his head back against the tree, whispering like he was carving the words into the air so she'd never forget them. I'm not the monster they said I am. His eyes hardened. But I know the men who are. Her breath hitched. They're coming, he said. And if they find you... She shook her head quickly. No, they can't. I didn't mean to see anything. I shouldn't have been here. She broke off, choking on panic. I just followed someone. I trusted him. And then everything went wrong. The man frowned sharply. Who? She shook her head, refusing to speak. He didn't press. His voice softened. Whatever brought you here, it wasn't your fault. Her shoulders sagged, a tiny surrender. Inside the warehouse, a flashlight beam swept across the darkness. A voice called out, "Check outside." The girl's breath fled her body. The man spoke urgently now. "Look at me." She did. "You're afraid of me." "Good. You should be." His voice dropped low. "But you should fear them more." A moment stretched between them, thin, fragile, but real. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the ropes again. Slowly, silently, she loosened another knot. Not enough to free him, just enough to give him a chance. His breath shuddered out, relief wrapped in warning. "Thank you," he whispered. The girl didn't answer, because footsteps were already heading straight toward them. The girl crept back through the tall grass, every blade whispering against her yellow dress as if warning her to turn around. The voices from the warehouse were growing louder now, closer. The men were outside, spreading out, their footsteps crunching over gravel as they searched. Searching for her. She crouched low and crawled, dirt smudging her knees, until she reached the tree again. The man was still there, still tied, still breathing hard from the hours of being bound. Sweat rolled down his neck, darkening the tattoos on his skin. But his eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, softened when they landed on her. "You came back," he whispered. She pressed a finger to her lips and peeked over her shoulder. Shadows moved between the acacia trees. The men were sweeping the area in a wide arc. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered back. "They're coming." "Then run," he said. "Don't get yourself killed because of me." But she didn't move. Instead, she stared at the ropes around his wrists, frayed, strained from where she had loosened one knot earlier. She reached for the blade she had tucked into her dress. A tiny thing, barely sharp, but it was all she had. "They took my mom," she said quietly. His breath caught. Not from pain, or maybe not only pain. "Those men?" he asked. She nodded without looking at him, eyes focused on the rope. Her hands shook as she slid the blade under one of the thick strands. "I saw them dragging you," she whispered. "Saw them beating you. Saw them tie you here. I didn't understand why, but I heard them say your name. Heard them say they needed to get rid of you before." She swallowed. "Before they moved, the woman. That's my mom. I know it." The man closed his eyes for a moment. "I'm sorry." She kept cutting. It wasn't clean or quick. The rope fibers resisted her, snapping one by one with rough, tiny pops. Every sound made her flinch. The man kept his gaze on the grass, tense. "Kid, you know helping me puts you in more danger." "They're already looking for me," she said. "And I can't stop them alone." Another rope strand snapped. "Why did they take her?" he asked. She hesitated. Then, because she trusted the wrong person. "We came here with someone. Someone who said he'd help us. Someone she believed." Her throat tightened. "I followed him, and then I heard yelling, and then everything went wrong." The man's face darkened, guilt flickering across it, the kind only someone who had lived in shadows could recognize. "They don't just take people for no reason," he murmured. "Your mother must have seen something. Or they needed her to force someone's hand." He studied her. "Maybe yours." She didn't answer. Her jaw set, and she sliced through the last stubborn half of the rope, not fully freeing him, but loosening it enough for one good pull to break it. Then she stepped back. "That's all I can do," she said. "If they hear us, they'll kill us both." He tested the rope with a slight jerk of his wrist. It held, barely. Another second, another tug, and he'd be free. "Why help me?" he asked quietly, searching her face. He meant it. The question seemed to matter to him more than the rope, more than the danger, more than anything. She looked at him, her eyes too old for her small frame. Eyes that had seen things no child should ever see. "Because you're the only one who isn't lying to me," she said. Then, even softer, "And because they took my mom." The man nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Then listen carefully." He leaned closer, keeping his voice low. I can get her back. She stared at him. But if I go in there tied to a tree, he said, I can't do anything. They'll finish what they started. And then they'll find you. And your mother will stay gone. He tugged the rope again. It stretched, fibers groaning. You cut enough, he breathed. Once you run, I can break free. The girl's heart pounded. She glanced around the clearing. Shadows moved again, closer now. A burst of gravel crunched under heavy boots. They're almost here, she whispered. Kid. His voice steadied her. Look at me. She did. You're not wrong to be scared of me, he said. You're smart to be. But I promise you something, and I don't make promises lightly. His jaw flexed. If you free me, I will get your mother back. A single tear slid down her cheek before she could wipe it away. You better, she whispered. Then she turned and ran. The tall grass swallowed her small figure as she sprinted toward the back of the warehouse, toward a cluster of broken crates where she'd hidden before. She crouched low, hugging her knees, peering through the cracks. The men stepped into the clearing. There! One barked. The kid was here. The girl pressed a hand over her mouth. One of the men kicked the dirt near the tree. He's still tied. Thought the kid would be stupid enough to help him. The other snorted. Kid's probably long gone. They leaned in closer to check the rope. The man jerked hard. The rope snapped. The girl gasped. Both men spun around, too slow, too surprised. The man surged forward from the tree, teeth gritted, muscles burning from hours of restraint. He struck the first attacker with a force that sent him stumbling. The second lunged at him, but the man twisted, dodged, grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the trunk. The girl ducked lower behind the crates. Dust drifted around her. She trembled, not from fear of the man anymore, but from the men he fought. Voices rose. A gun clattered to the dirt. Someone cursed. Someone else groaned. Then silence. Heavy, loaded silence. The girl peeked out. The two men were on the ground, breathing, but defeated. The man looked up, searching the grass line until he found her small silhouette. He didn't smile, but he nodded once. A promise sealed. Let's go get your mom, he said. And the girl stepped out from hiding, not because she trusted him completely, but because she needed to trust someone. And he was the only one still standing. The clearing was still thick with tension when the girl stepped out from behind the crates. The man wiped blood from his lip, breathing hard as he crouched to grab one of the fallen men's knives. He didn't take the gun, not yet. Too loud, too dangerous with her close. He jerked his chin toward the warehouse. We move. Now. They crossed the clearing quickly, staying low. The tall grass swallowed them again, and the man kept a hand lightly on the girl's shoulder, guiding her without slowing her. Every sound made her jump, the faint creak of old metal, the groan of shifting wine through the broken roof panels, a distant hum from the warehouse generator. Then the warehouse door clanged open. 3 men stepped out. The girl froze. The man pulled her down with him into the grass, both dropping to their bellies. The men spread out, scanning the trees, cursing under their breath. They should have been back by now. Maybe they found the kid. Or maybe something went wrong. The girl's hand shook in the dirt as she looked to the man. He shook his head slowly. Not yet. One of the men walked dangerously close to their hiding spot, boots crushing the grass inches from her cheek. She needed to do something, or they'd be found. Before she could overthink it, she grabbed a loose stone beside her hand. Her breath caught as she waited for half a second. She threw it. The stone arced across the clearing and struck a rusted drum near the warehouse wall. Clang. The sound split the silence sharply. The hell was that? All 3 men turned toward the noise. The man didn't waste a heartbeat. He pushed himself up, slipped behind the nearest tree, and gestured for the girl to stay low. The men muttered to each other, weapons raised, moving toward the drum. One split off toward the corner of the building. None looked back. The man gave the faintest nod. Now. They sprinted, silent, controlled, to the side of the warehouse. The metal siding was scratched, dented, and peeling, a structure too old to be safe but too strong to fall. There, hidden behind a collapsed stack of pallets, was a rust-eaten service door half off its hinge. He pushed it open with 2 fingers. A low groan of metal echoed. They froze. No footsteps changed direction outside. No shouts. No discovery. The man exhaled the breath he'd been holding. "Stay close," he whispered, and slipped inside. The warehouse swallowed them like a mouth closing. Inside, everything was dark and broken and echoing. The air smelled of dust, diesel, and something metallic, something the girl didn't want to identify. Shattered beams angled down like skeletal ribs. Crates were stacked in chaotic piles, some fallen apart, spilling old cables and tools. Their footsteps were almost silent on the dirt and concrete, but every sound, every drip of water, every creak, echoed too loudly. The girl hovered behind him, her fingers brushing the hem of his shirt. She didn't dare lose him in the dark. "This place," the man murmured, more to himself than her. "I know every room, every corridor." He paused, listening. Somewhere deeper in the warehouse, the echo of footsteps bounced. Slow, heavily paced. Someone was patrolling. The man motioned for silence and guided her through a narrow passage between stacked crates, weaving through shadows. Every few steps, he paused to listen. Each time, she held her breath. Voices drifted faintly through the metal walls. "We moved the woman into the back storage. Don't let anyone near her." The girl stiffened. "Mom." She tugged the man's sleeve desperately and pointed ahead to a corridor lit by a flickering bulb. "She's inside," she mouthed. The man nodded. "Locked room," he whispered. She nodded again. They crept down the corridor. The bulb buzzed, flicking from dim yellow to harsh white. It cast their shadows long and uneven across the walls. The man checked each corner before moving, eyes sharp, instincts honed. Halfway down the hall, they heard footsteps, close, steady, coming from around the bend. The girl gasped and moved toward a door on their right. The man caught her wrist before she could open it. He shook his head. No noise. He pulled her into a tight alcove behind a stack of pipes and placed a finger over her lips. They pressed together, barely breathing. A man walked past the corridor entrance, muttering to himself. His gun tapped against his leg with each step, echoing a cold rhythm. The girl's pulse hammered in her ears. The man's hand pressed gently, firmly against her shoulder, grounding her. The guard paused, turned his head slightly. The girl squeezed her eyes shut. Then he kept walking, disappearing into another hallway. The man waited 3 long seconds, then pulled her back out. "That was close," he whispered. They moved again, quickly this time, until they finally reached the end of the corridor, where a metal door sat heavily framed in concrete. A padlock secured it. The girl raised her hand and pointed urgently. "She's inside," she whispered, voice trembling. The man brushed his fingers over the lock, testing its strength. "This won't be quiet," he murmured. "But we don't have a choice." The girl squeezed her fists. "Break it." He lifted the knife he'd taken and wedged it into the lock's bracket, preparing to pry. A shuffling behind them stopped him. The girl turned, her breath freezing in her chest. A soft, deadly click echoed through the corridor. The unmistakable sound of a gun cocking. She didn't want to look. She didn't want to see who it was. But she turned anyway. A dark figure stood at the end of the hallway, gun raised, face hidden in shadows. "I was wondering how long it'd take you to show your face," the man behind her said coldly. The figure stepped forward, the barrel of the gun never wavering. "You should have stayed tied to that tree," the voice said. "Now you're both going to die." The girl's heart stuttered. The man shifted slightly, protectively, placing himself between her and the gun. But they were trapped, cornered, locked room behind them, armed enemy in front, and no shadows left to hide in. The corridor tightened around them, walls pressing in, air thick, silence trembling like a held breath. The girl's heart hammered against her ribs as the gunman stepped fully into the flickering light. He was older than the others, broader. His presence pulled the shadows toward him. Gray threaded through his beard, and a long scar carved down his left cheek. His eyes were cold, steady, the eyes of a man who had led others into darkness and never regretted it. The man beside her stiffened. "Denton," he muttered. The leader smirked. "So you did recognize my voice." The girl's throat tightened. She looked up at Gary, the man she had trusted enough to free. His jaw clenched, but he didn't step back. Denton raised the gun a little higher. "Move away from the door, Gary." Gary positioned himself more firmly in front of the girl. "Not happening." Denton sighed, as if exhausted by the heroics. "Always dramatic. Even when you're the one who caused all this." The girl felt the words strike her like a slap. Caused all this. Her fingers curled at her sides. Gary didn't speak. His breath grew heavier. Denton stepped closer, slow and deliberate. The overhead bulb flickered again, buzzing. "You didn't tell her, did you?" Denton said, eyes sliding to the girl. "Didn't think she deserved the truth?" Gary glared. "She doesn't need anything from you." "Oh, but she does. She deserves to know why her mother is locked in that room behind you. Why she was dragged out of her life and beaten until she couldn't stand." The girl flinched, swallowing a sob she refused to let escape. Gary tensed. "Denton." "Quiet." The gun clicked, silencing the rest of his words. Denton's eyes turned back to the girl. "I'll tell you what he won't. But you listen to me, not him. Understand?" She couldn't speak. She managed the smallest nod. Denton smiled. Not kindly. With satisfaction. "Your mother," he began, "stole something from us." The girl blinked. My mom wouldn't." "She did," Denton snapped. "And she didn't do it alone." He gestured toward Gary. "He was supposed to deliver that item to us. It was simple. A clean job. But your mother overheard something she shouldn't have, and he panicked." Gary shook his head. "No. Don't listen to him." Denton darted forward, shoving the barrel of the gun against Gary's chest. Gary didn't move. "She panicked," Denton repeated with a sneer. "So your hero here hid it. A piece of evidence. Proof that would put a lot of powerful men in prison. We needed it gone. He decided to keep it safe." He spat the word safe like it was poison. The girl's stomach turned. "He hid it," Denton continued. "But he didn't tell her where. And she refused to tell us what she knew, where he might have stashed it. She claimed she didn't know anything." The girl's breath hitched. That voice she'd heard through the walls earlier, the screams, the begging, it had been her mother refusing to betray someone. "Gary. He's the reason we took her." Denton's gaze softened just slightly, like he was delivering a truth she had to accept. "He's the reason she's in that room. The reason she was beaten. The reason you're both here." The girl's legs wobbled. The ground tilted under her. She heard her own voice, small and breaking. You let them hurt her?" Gary turned instantly, pain flashing across his face. No, Debbie, listen." "Don't call me that," she whispered. Her chest burned. Her hands shook violently. Denton chuckled, lowering the gun a fraction. "You see. She deserves to know who you really are." Gary stepped toward her, ignoring the gun, ignoring Denton's warning. "What he's telling you is twisted," he said, breath raw. "I hid that evidence because it was the only thing keeping your mother alive. She heard them planning to kill her, Debbie. She wasn't supposed to overhear anything that night." He swallowed hard, jaw trembling. "I hid it to protect her, to give us leverage. Without it, they would have killed her in the first hour." The girl shook her head, tears blurring the corridor. She took a step back. "Then why didn't you save her sooner?" Gary's voice cracked. "I tried." The girl stepped farther away, pressing against the cold wall. She felt small again, like she was 6, hiding behind her mother's legs when men raised their voices. She didn't know who to believe. The man she freed. The man she feared. The man who had risked his life for her since the moment she found him tied to that tree. or the leader whose voice carried the truth like a weapon? Denton narrowed his eyes at her trembling form. "Choose wisely, kid," he said softly. "The man you're protecting is the reason you're losing everything." Gary's voice broke. "Debbie, listen to me. Please." She looked between them, between the gun, and the tattooed man she'd almost begun to trust, and the heavy metal door behind her mother. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't know who to believe. But she knew one thing. Whoever was lying was about to destroy whatever was left of her world. For a moment, no one moved. The girl's breath trembled in her lungs, caught between two men, one with a gun, one with a past built of shadows. Then Gary stepped forward. Denton swung the gun toward him. "Don't," the girl whispered. But it was too late. Gary lunged. The gun fired, a deafening blast that ripped through the narrow corridor. The girl screamed and dropped to her knees, covering her ears as the echo bounced around her, sharp and metallic. The bullet missed. Barely. Gary slammed into Denton with the force of someone fighting for more than their life, for redemption. The gun skittered across the floor, spinning toward the broken crates. "Run!" Gary yelled. The girl stumbled to her feet and bolted to the locked room. Her hands shook violently as she grabbed the padlock, pulling at it uselessly. Behind her, Gary and Denton crashed into the wall, fists cracking against ribs, elbows against jawbone. A grunt. A curse. A sickening thud. "Debbie, hurry!" Gary choked out. Her fingers fumbled over the lock in blind panic, tears blurring everything. She grabbed the knife Gary had dropped earlier and smashed it against the metal. The fight behind her grew louder, harsher. Someone gasped. Someone was thrown against the pipes. The entire warehouse seemed to shake. And crack. The padlock snapped. She pushed the door open with her shoulder and stumbled inside. Her mother lay slumped against the wall, wrists tied, hair tangled and face bruised. She looked small, too small, her chest rising in thin, ragged breaths. "Mom!" Debbie dropped beside her, undoing the knots with frantic fingers. "Mom, please wake up, please." Her mother stirred weakly. "Deb. It's me. I've got you. We're leaving." But as she helped her mother sit up, a sudden sharp boom rattled the walls. A pipe had burst. A spark fell. And then another. One landed on an old pile of oil-soaked fabric. It ignited instantly. Flames crawled across the floor like hungry fingers. The warehouse, ancient, wooden, and rotting, caught fire faster than she could comprehend. Heat surged up the walls. Smoke rolled in thick waves. Outside the room, Gary shouted something, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of fire. Debbie pulled her mother up, slinging her arm over her shoulders. The woman swayed but managed to stand. "We have to go," Debbie whispered, her throat burning. "Now!" She guided her mother into the corridor just as Gary and Denton crashed through a stack of crates. Denton recovered first. He lunged for her mother, fingers reaching. Gary grabbed him by the collar and slammed him back. "You're not touching them," Gary snarled. The fire banked along the walls, leaping from beam to beam. The heat became unbearable. The metal door behind them warped and groaned. Debbie pulled her mother away from the fight. "Mom, stay with me. Stay awake." Behind her, wood cracked. Something massive collapsed in a shower of sparks. Gary and Denton rolled beneath it, coughing violently as smoke swallowed them. "Gary!" Debbie called out before she could stop herself. He didn't look back. He threw his arm across Denton's throat, pinning him to the ground. "Get her out," he rasped. "Go!" Debbie's eyes stung, not just from smoke. She dragged her mother down the corridor, stepping over burning debris. Flames licked at her legs, heat blistering her skin. Every breath felt like swallowing razors. A beam collapsed inches behind them. The whole warehouse groaned, collapsing in sections like a dying beast. They reached the side door. Debbie shoved it open, coughing as daylight burst in, raw, bright, blinding after all the darkness. She pulled her mother out onto the dirt. Fresh air. Open sky. Safety. Her mother collapsed to her knees beside her, sucking in breaths that rattled painfully. Debbie grabbed her face gently. "Mom! Mom, look at me. You're okay. I've got you." Her mother nodded faintly, tears cutting through the soot on her cheeks. And for a brief second, one precious second, Debbie felt relief. Then she turned. The warehouse was fully engulfed in flame. Huge columns of smoke rolled upward. Windows burst outward. The roof sagged, ready to fall. And somewhere inside, Gary was still fighting, still choking, still protecting. The man who might have ruined everything. The man who might have saved everything. Her mother tugged at her sleeve weakly. "Deb, don't." Debbie froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her breath shook. She saw two paths. Run with her mother, escape, live. Or go back into the burning warehouse for the man who had lied, fought, bled, and risked everything for them. The flames roared louder, sparks shooting into the sky. Her mother whispered, voice trembling, "Debbie, please, don't go back." But Debbie's feet wouldn't move. Her fists clenched. Her heart pounded. Her mind spun with everything she'd seen, everything he'd done, everything she didn't understand yet. One truth gripped her harder than the fear. She couldn't leave him to die. Not yet. Not like this. She took one trembling step toward the fire. Then another. And another. The girl chose. Smoke clawed at the sky as the warehouse collapsed inward, beams groaning like dying beasts. Heat rolled off the flames in violent waves, the air blistering, choking, but the little girl's arms were still locked around the man's shoulders, refusing to let go. "Pull, baby, pull," her mother shouted, coughing as she dragged at his other arm. Together, stumbling, trembling, they hauled him across the cracked concrete and out through the broken doorway just as a burst of fire roared behind them. The blast threw embers over their heads. The girl shielded him with her small body, as if she could hold back fire with her bones. Shy maid, mafia boss, deaf mom, sign language, emotional story, viral story, inspiring story, touching moment, true story, drama video, heartfelt story, communication, sign language story, mafia family, emotional encounter, shy girl story, deaf community, unexpected sign language, viral emotional video, surprising moment, human connection, sign language communication, emotional reaction, viral storytelling, dramatic story.